leaked reports seem to claim that Russia might be preparing to withdraw from Kherson. But are they also surging in Yadhine? I'm going to break down all the news and the rumors right now. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's November 14th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, taking a look at the control map, there's been one sector where we've seen significant change, and you can see here from the 12th, this large contested area has now seen Russian forces advance into it, and this is a significant advance. We're looking at the max a distance of almost 2 kilometers, which over the span of really, I mean, it's not quite 24 hours, but here's where it was, 3 days ago. Now we're seeing Russia advance all the way to the limit here. I think it's a sign that, again, some of the hard-won gains from the early counteroffensive are being rolled back by Russian forces, which, just like the Russian forces, or just like the Ukrainian forces, rather, it seems like this shaping operation near Bakhmut is actually in some ways more effective than the actual effort that the Russians are making in and around Avdiivka. Now, looking over at the combat map, you can see Russian forces conducting 50 combat engagements across the front line with the standard smattering. It is interesting to see that you can see, well, there's some reported engagements in the Klachivka area, none in the Burkiva Reservoir. You can see this map shows Ukrainian forces is continuing to hold as far as the reservoir itself. Right, the other map has this entire salient closed by Russia. So an interesting, diversion or divergence from these two maps. Now you can see in Avdiivka, right, Russian forces again pushing near this southern prong, as well as near Donetsk City and in Zaporizhzhia. But you can see the reports publicly are very quiet as far as activity in and around the Kherson region, right? There's some public acknowledgement that towns like Prytyanivka, Poema, and Piedstepne are all contested, but that has been updated in some time, and some of the rumors are actually that there's significantly more fighting and action in the Dnipro region than is being publicly discussed, right? If you're interested in looking at some of the footage, I can't do those breakdowns here on YouTube of the operation, but they are going to appear in Combat Vet News. They're actually, the next video is going to drop today. If you want to become a member, it's the best way to support the channel. I don't get many sponsors because obviously I cover the war. But if you want to support what I do, keep me independent, right? Any one of these tiers is going to get you access to the members only area, where twice a week I do a deep dive analysis of the uncensored combat footage coming out of this conflict and from the Israel-Hamas conflict. So definitely worth checking out at combatvetnews.com. Now, what I think is also interesting, when we look over at the Institute for the Study of War, they're reporting a really interesting note. Russian state media, this is the Kremlin's press service, TASS, released and then quickly retracted reports about a, quote, regrouping of Russian forces on the left bank of Kherson, that they're moving to positions further east of the Dnipro, suggesting that Russian command and or the Russian state media apparatus isn't coordinating their information line for the Russian response to these ground operations on the East Bank. Now, what it seems like they are implying, or what makes military sense, right? When we look at this chart here, you can see that there's significant issues, right? You've got the Dnieper River here, and for the Russians, they've got a couple of tactical problems they've got to solve. One is that they need to preserve their lines in Crimea. The Crimea forms an essential supply line to continue to equip Russian forces fighting in Zaporizhzhia. Now, if they can't withdraw wholesale, right? They can't have the Ukrainians come to the proverbial gates of Crimea, so to speak. So I think it's likely that you may see them withdraw possibly along this line here. Something that's going to prevent the Ukrainians from interdicting supplies moved from Crimea into Zaporizhzhia, and they're unlikely to really worry about the Ukrainians pushing in these this deeper Dnieper River region. And so I think they may look to use some existing terrain, possibly this canal here, connected to the roadway as kind of a natural barrier. Another option would be this canal here that seems to run relatively north-south. Either one would be a good option and would allow Russian forces to preserve their essential ground lines of communication or supply lines while repositioning away from the Dnieper in response to the considerable pressure that Ukrainian forces have been putting on them. Now, if they do so, of course, Russian forces are not prepared necessarily to conduct a defense, especially along a sort of north-south line like this, which is really what they would have to do if they were to withdraw. Well, I guess in theory they could have some sort of weird salient here, but you see the challenge involved in, giving your enemy space in which they can operate. It's simply Russia doesn't have fortified positions. They're not prepared to do this. In Zaporizhzhia, they spent months digging these fortifications, preparing a huge network. You can see it here highlighted in yellow and red. There's literally nothing here. Look, just a tiny smidge of fortifications along these lines. So if you see Russian forces withdraw en masse, you're going to have actually Russia's going to have a big problem on its hands in terms of preventing the Ukrainians from simply sweeping through Kherson. So do I think this is credible? I'm 50-50 on it. Sometimes these statements just get drafted. And it could have just been an error, right? Instead of saving it as draft, you save it as publish. These kind of mistakes are routine in any operation, and it seems it doesn't make a ton of sense. There's some rumors though that Ukraine has actually penetrated potentially kilometers into the Dnieper region, or the Kherson region. So I wouldn't say, I'm never going to say never about this. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you. Thank you so much to the Colonel tier members of CombatVetNews.com. Thanks so much to our Lieutenant tier members and all the members of Combat Vet News. I couldn't do this without you guys. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.